Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Cybersecurity Recruiter Podcast. Today I'm joined by Bill Seaman. How you doing, my friend?
Doing good. Glad to be here.
Good, yeah. Welcome to the show. It's me and you, look, typical recruiters. We couldn't even get the record button pressed because we were chatting so much. It's just never get two recruiters on a pod, mate, eh?
No. We keep talking, and then realize, wow, we have to hit record.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just going to do you a bit of an introduction, Bill, for the listeners. If I get anything wrong, do feel free to let me know. But entered recruitment back in the year 2000, TAC worldwide. You were there for about 4.5 years. You then went on to Quent as a full-time recruiter. You then progressed on to Baltimore Sun as a recruitment manager. You were then at Apex Systems again as a recruitment manager. You then moved on to Med Assurant. Again, you were a talent acquisition manager. You were then at Prometric, where you were a recruitment operations manager. You were then at Modis as a development manager. You then progressed on to be a senior talent acquisition specialist for solutions. You were also a technical recruit at 14 West. You then moved up to be a director of talent acquisition for Dragos. And at the minute, you are a talent acquisition consultant, kind of business consultant at Filamatic. So, welcome to the show. How you doing?
Good, thank you. I've definitely been in some diverse backgrounds based on that. Lots of different industries,
Yeah.
which goes on to what we were talking about prior to. There's some roles that can be universal and can really jump into different industries fairly easily.
Yeah, definitely, Bill. And look, 24 years in the recruitment game. I'm sure you've seen a lot. I'm sure there's a lot the listeners can learn from you. I know we've been talking about the market conditions and what's happened and ups and downs. And I think there's a lot we can get out of the episode today to help the listeners' mindset and overcoming kind of tough times and stuff like that. But I'll start where I always start. I know I've done you a bit of an introduction, but it's always nice to say, what do you get up to today? What's a day in the professional life of Bill look like at the minute, my friend?
Currently, I'm doing a consulting role with a manufacturing company. It's been very interesting because I came in there initially just to recruit for them. And on the very first day I showed up, I found out that their HR director had left. And so day one, they're like, as we were talking, you sound like you know what you're talking about. Can you help us in this capacity as well while you find our replacement? So it really started off out of the gate, focusing on trying to recruit for them, but really jumping in other areas and then identifying, oh, we have some challenges here. We have some great opportunities as well. I found that great director for them, brought her on board, and her and I have been just going through working closely with the owners of the companies to help them through this transformation period that they're in right now. So we're really touching, it's interesting because we're touching every element of the business from, my first thing was, of course, overhauling the recruitment program, A to Z, really touching every element from how do we go to market and create ads to how are we screening, structuring interviews for consistency, reinforcing candidate experience being so important to the market and how you go through and consistency on that, and offering support to leadership and anyone involved in the interview process to make sure A, they're getting the most out of the conversations, and B, from a company standpoint, protecting them, making sure they're not going down the rabbit hole asking questions that they shouldn't or that are irrelevant. Doing a lot of building on that. And then as we're changing, talk about communication strategies and plans and organizational structure and restructuring teams. It's definitely kept me really busy.
Obviously, a fascinating one for people. I know me and you have talked about this off air before. How should people make sure they're getting the right salary, or what do you think is the best way for people to benchmark their own salary? Any thoughts on
I
that?
think like when I go about really benchmarking salaries, I have a unique perspective being on this side of the desk of that. I use a few different functions that I go to. So one, I think the best way that I get the best results, but unfortunately it's the least scientific, so it doesn't help the organization as much, is really talking to folks. Very often, understanding where people are, where are they based on their skill set, their years of experience. You find out what people are currently making. I think that really is the best indicator. However, if I present it to a manager, I've been doing this a long time, and I think I've gotten pretty good at estimating salaries and comp and ranges of where people are based on the industry. But when I bring that up, they're always like, where's the data? How do you back it up? I often I use a lot of online sources really I look at the Glassdoors, I look at the Indeed, the Career Builders, salaries.com, PayScale, but I don't use any one source as truth because there's a lot of different variances in that. What I try to weigh is what is the market saying there? What do I know to be true? And then from my position, I have to balance that with internal equities as well. Because when you go out to market in a new role and even price it, you have to look, I may be under market for that role. But if internally we're under market across the board, we have to raise that up to the attention of the leaders to either say, A, we have to adjust salaries here to be competitive, to attract what we want, or B, working with them to adjust their expectation to realize that for the salaries you're asking, you're not going to get the talent that you want on there. But it's really, I think organic is where I get probably the best data, but I always have to benchmark and back it up. So when I supply that, and then I'll use agencies often too. I reach out to like you and other recruiters to be like, hey, here's what I'm thinking. And I just want to validate, am I on course or off course? And oftentimes agencies will have salary surveys, which I love because the more data that we can get that back up what we say is a stronger argument that we can have for organizations to make sure that they are paying properly or making sure they're aware that if they're not, what is the ramifications and what do they have in lieu of? Because it might be a great culture, great environment. There's other things that can keep people. Salary is not always number one, but you have to be paying fairly. And I think at the end of the day, as I've consulted people over the years, you probably heard me say this, I call it the employment tripod. From a candidate standpoint, there's a tripod. You have to have 3 equal legs to be stable. If it's not equal, it's going to be wobbly and fall over. And those are the things I look for when I look for a job. Is leg number 1 is, can I do the job each day? Do I like the function? Do I want to do this? Am I going to enjoy the work? Number 2 is, do I enjoy the environment? And that's a lot. That's the company. That's the culture. That's the vision. That's the leadership team, the people I'm working with. Do I want to play in the sandbox with them all day? Can I do that? And then third is the compensation. And the question is, am I being paid fairly for my contribution? Right. And when those things are all in equal balance, you have the right thing. That's the right job. I think you have stability. When people have those factors, and when I've had those in the past, when someone calls me up and say, hey, Bill, I'd love to talk to you about an opportunity. I've candidly, no, you couldn't pay me enough to go right now. It doesn't matter what it is. I'm really content. But when one of those are out of whack, that's typically when someone's definitely more pullable.
Yeah, definitely. You're right, but it's not. It's not always about. Let's say money plays a factor, but it certainly isn't the. Let's say the be all and the be all and end all. And I think you're right. By the way, on the salary, it's when you get out to market and start really having conversations because. I know from agency side, clients can give all these different reasons as to why the parameters should be the parameters. But if you're on the phone to 10, 15, 20 people doing the same job, exactly, like for real, what it is. And it's indisputable because look, I've spoke to 20 people. This is what the rate is. You can't get better, can you?
Day one here when you had to replace a role, they told me what they wanted. I was able to look at it right away, and it was like a manager level role. I knew what the salary was, and I said, what do you want to correct? What do you want different this time? After the person, he started naming things out, and right away I was like, you're not going to get it. And he gave me a funny look. I was like, you're going to keep repeating the same thing because A, this is a leadership role. It needs to be on the leadership team and titled the same, not just from a title standpoint. But 2 is managerial candidate isn't going to have the experience that you need at this point. They're not going to have the depth and breadth of experience. You do need someone who's stronger, who's been there and done that more, has broader exposure. So I was like, I need an extra at least $25,000 minimum to play and give me some flexibility. I'll go find you what you want. And thankfully, they trusted me and able to go out to market and really find the solution that they're looking for. And I think that's oftentimes from both perspectives is understanding is when you're hiring a position, you have something you need to have fulfilled, something you need to have accomplished. And I think sometimes changing the dialogue to that really helps both the candidate and the employer understanding where they can step away from this whole job description, duties, responsibilities, qualifications. I have managers who will literally go through and they want to check mark every qualification and think, oh no, if they don't hit every mark, they're not going to be, we can't talk to them. And they have the mentality of, they think it's like shopping at Walmart. I'm going to give you a list and they'll give me every item off this list. And we're not dealing with products here. We're dealing with people. And even if it's the same industries, no two environments are the same. No two companies are structured exactly the same. So the experiences are going to differ. Trying to make people understand that if you have 70 or 80% of those qualifications, but you have the capacity to learn and adapt and to grow, that's someone you absolutely should talk to. And I think it helps a candidate as well when you're on the market exploring to understand what's important to them. What are they trying to accomplish? Because then you can, while you're interviewing, give them the proper examples. I think one of the most frustrating things I've seen in the interview process has been right away where managers will just start hammering with questions, right? And you have no context, no setup on that. So one of the things I always, first thing, my calls are always structured the same. Let me tell you about the company. Let me tell you about the opportunity, right? Because I try to set that stage. Therefore, when I ask questions, hopefully you're following suit and giving me examples that are going to be applicable to what I've laid out for you. But since so many managers don't do that, I think it's incumbent on the candidate to make that happen organically. And how I do that often is the very first question, I think universally we've had right away as you did an introduction today, has always been, tell me a little bit about yourself. They want to do that icebreaker. And that's a perfect chance as a candidate to say, great. Let me give you my high level bio, just really quick high level what I've done, but pivot at that point to say, I'm really excited to come in here today to understand. And I rapid fire 2 or 3 questions at them. Human nature, if I ask a question, they're likely to answer. So I throw out questions like, I'd love to understand, what are the challenges? What are you trying to accomplish in this role? What does success look like to you? And really trying to pivot from this structured interview to more of an organic conversation. I think those are the strongest types of interviews when you can just have almost turn into a consulting session of, let me understand your challenges. Let me understand what you want to do. And that, therefore, now I have a point of reference when I start giving examples. They're relevant because as prepared as I can be and say, I think I have these great examples to share during my interview. If it's not what they're looking for, it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, it's true, Bill, and it's interesting hearing you talk about. Obviously, you've put a lot of thought into that, and a lot of time, and a lot of effort. And when you're recruiting all day, you just, obviously, we kind of probably both the same. We get quite obsessed about it and stuff like that. And when I stop and think about it, it's amazing how many like really technical senior people will actually be spending so much of their day recruiting. If I think about some of my clients now, like I'm dealing some of them that hire aggressively, you've got people in really senior positions and they're almost not doing the job of a recruiter, but they're doing a lot of interviewing and a lot of recruiting. It really is worth spending some time like really thinking about how things should be structured and done and how connections are established and rapports built and making sure everything's out in the open from the word go to make sure it's a long-term move. Like I know as recruiters, we do it as second nature, but it just makes you stop and think. I wonder how many people, inside businesses, when they're spending all that time recruiting, how much of their time is actually spent thinking about it, like you just have then.
Yeah, unfortunately, not a lot.
Mm,
And that's
mm,
one of the things that I
mm,
find it's often, I always try to tell managers, we need to prepare for the interview. The most important thing is preparing. And that's from understanding the job so I can go out there and hopefully find the people, but also who's going to be on the interview team? How are we going to structure this so we're consistent? Also, you want to make it a good experience for the candidate. I'm sure we've all been in those interviews where literally you go back to back and it's almost like I'm repeating myself every interview. I'm telling the same stories over and over. It's monotonous, it's boring, and then literally everyone's only coming out with a little bit of the same information. Now, it can be valuable to a point of, is it validation? Are they consistent in what they're saying? Are they truthful? But you're not doing a good job from a company standpoint and really a couple things, really getting deep into any specific area because of time constraints on that. And oftentimes I think it allows the interviewers to really think they have more power over the process than they do, because oftentimes they may dissent on it and then they have hurt egos if you override and hire someone that someone on the panel said a no to. So there's a lot of things that you have to balance. So one of those things that I try to consult with them is give everyone a function in a role, right? So if you're a peer, you're going to talk about hopefully a technical subset of. So I'm going to have you focus on maybe their transition periods. Why do they transition? What are their motivations? Some might focus on technical skills. Take your conversation and go deep into one area And so that, therefore, I have better evaluation, better insights into it from the candidates. It's a different conversation for each one. And then also, if the time comes where I override someone, where it happens, where it says, great, I'm going to hire them, even though you said no, you can easily understand that here's the things that were important that they lined up with. I understand this was a weakness. However, it's something that we can work on. And so you get better buy-in from the team and less pushback. Because I've had managers come up to, even directors come up to me really irate when we've overridden them. And they're like, why even bother? Why do you even have me involved in the process if you're not going to listen to me? And, I've had to, nicely say, this isn't your role. You're not the hiring manager for it. You're an influencer on it. We respect your opinion, because what you have to understand is your opinion, even if we don't make the decision that you want, your insight is valuable on how we better onboard and develop that person. Because if you've identified areas of weaknesses that you didn't like, now we're aware of that. Now we can work with that individual, hopefully from a developmental standpoint, to make sure that's not an issue.
Yeah, Bill, I'm listening to you talk there, man, and so much of it's about communication, isn't it? And having good, I've had it. I've had it agency side, mate. You have certain clients that genuinely really want to partner with you, and they want to really. It is a I know that word gets thrown around a lot, but it really is a genuine partnership. And you get others that they just don't really want to give you the time, and it just long term it just doesn't work. I actually did one of my clients, Bill. I've done so many hires with it. I'm in their Slack group. Like I'm in their company Slack group. It's just game check. They've been a client for years. We've done like near on 50 hires together now. And it's like the game gets easy when you've got that level of communication. But they've got to want to do it, and you've got to get the buy-in. And yes, there's certain things that the likes of me and you can do, Bill, isn't there, and get it in. But they've got to want to do it as well, haven't they?
No, absolutely. And those are the best types of partners. And what I always try to look for, because it was what you and I talked about a little bit before we started recording today, on is so many people feel it's just a skill match, right? It's here's the requirement, go find me a person. And you're missing the boat there, I think, for everyone. Because in the technical side, they don't love it when I say this, but your technical skills are only about half of it, right? And that's only half the equation. It's 50%. The other 50% is your cultural fit. Can you succeed in our environment? Are you going to be successful in our environment? And you really have to understand that culture. So when those companies partner with you, involve you in their Slack group, you get a taste that corporate culture. You get a good sense. So when you're on the phone with someone right away, you can say, like when we worked together at Dragos, you knew what a Dragos profile was, right? Just talking to a person, there was a certain sense of a mission, because it was a very mission oriented company. So when you got that person who was very mission driven and trying to do something right away, you're like, this is someone who could be considered there. Versus if they're all out me and stuff, forget it. I don't care how skilled you are. If they're more focused on themselves, it's just not going to fit in that environment. And so that's why it's important for companies to hopefully partner and share and really give a good insight on too.
Yeah, I say we can educate. You can educate, but some people are really open and they're really up for learning and taking on board the info. When you get that and it flows, it's just brilliant. But when it doesn't, it's a bloody nightmare, mate, isn't it?
No, it is. It really is. I definitely had that before, where you're like, I saw the light bulb turn on in them. I got them. And then the next day they turn around and revert back to we talked about this. We're in completely agreement on what we should do in the strategy and why. And now you're not even going to listen to it. And all you can do is I just continue to beat that drum. Because I'm like, it's the right thing to do. That's why you're paying me to come in. I'll deliver what you want, but I'm not going to just yes you to death. I'm doing you a disservice. I will, but I'm going to continue to tell you and reinforce a better way to do stuff. And I think the owner gave me a great compliment here one day. He says, the thing I like about you, he goes, you're not afraid to disagree with me. Right. And he's been there since 1970. He's been there a long time. He's like, you're not afraid to tell me no and disagree, but you always do it in a very thoughtful and respectful way and back it up. So I know when I go to him and dissent on him, I can't just say no, but I'm like, let me tell you no. And I know how he is. Let me explain why. And then I'll back it up with some additional data just to really paint that picture. So hopefully I'm educating them through that process. And whether they accept it or not, that's going to be up to them. But I'm going to provide that, and I'm going to continue to, because it is a best practice often.
Yeah.
And it's what, if you listen, this will help make it easier. If not, you're going to continue to struggle, but I just want to make you aware of that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think that's a credit to communication skills. I think that's a good little, a good little thing for people listening to remember as well. Like if you're going to disagree, you've got to be real with people, but yeah, do it in a thoughtful way, and then have facts to back it up. I think that's a good one for, because there'll be a
Social
lot of
communication, perspective, right? Always sharing perspective. It was interesting. I got feedback from a candidate yesterday. In fact, we had a senior candidate come on board. Very, on paper, you'd think he's way overqualified for the role. And he really was. But he came in and unfortunately didn't do as well as we thought he would. And he'd done well on first couple phone screens, but once he got on site, didn't. And the feedback was this: I felt he was trying to give the answers I wanted and not what he would do. And so I was hesitant in delivering that. And I think, as much as, yes, people are trying to give, I want to give answers that they want to hear. You don't know enough about the environment. You're always better off giving the answers and backing up from your perspective why. So over here, this is what we did, and here's why we attack things this way. Here's why it worked out here. And if you can give 2 or 3 examples that might have, taken slightly different approaches, it shows there's an adaptability, but there's also a method behind what you're doing. You're not just doing something to do it, but there's a reason behind it. And I think that's more important to people. They don't want to just hear the answer that they might think should be the right one. They want to know that you can think, that you can be a team member, that you can contribute. And I think that's where, like, this candidate really sharp, but missed the mark and missed an opportunity. And I don't think it was because he doesn't have the skills, doesn't have the background, but he just couldn't communicate that effectively. And I think that's the really important thing is, as you mentioned a few minutes ago, our whole world is about communication. And it's about educating often the candidates, also educating the managers, and trying to facilitate a good conversation that's going to hopefully yield the information that they're looking for so they can make a good decision on both sides. Is this the right company for me? Is this the right environment for me? And for the manager, is this the right team member who's going to bring value there? And it's really about how do we help push to make sure they have a better communication, and in doing so. So as I've coached candidates over the years, I use the acronym. I probably saw off some book I read, but like PAR, like golf, PAR, problem, action, result, right?
Okay.
And some people call it SAR, situation, action, result, but it's the same thing. It's a framework to answer questions during the interview. When asked a question, you want to paint a picture, right? It's, let me tell you what the problem that we faced, or the challenge or situation I was in. Here's a specific action or activity that I did, but then you anchor it with what the result was, because actions without a result, who cares? You did some great stuff. If you had no impact, it doesn't matter. People want to make investments and want to hire people are going to make a difference. So I think it's important as you answer questions, try to keep that framework in mind of, I'm painting a picture. They haven't been here before. I need to try to keep it brief, hopefully, but keep it consistent. And I think that framework of problem, action, result also helps you keep on track, because I've had those situations, and we're recruiters, we can be talkative. But I've been in those conversations where they'll ask a question, you go off on a tangent, and then you're like, oh my God, I forgot what the question was. Happened because you get so revved up for that conversation and you go off on a tangent. So I always try to keep that in mind, because it helps bring me back to task.
Yeah, it does. But you know, a lot of stuff as well. It's when you talk about pushing back and not being a yes man or a yes woman, like so much of that as well, it is about confidence, isn't it? Because you've got
Yeah.
to have been doing what you've been doing for a bit to get to that stage. I think sometimes you've got to get that experience and stuff like that. But yeah, when I think about it, mate, so much is about just gaining that confidence over time. But I want to come on to the market in general. It's been like really tough for some people. I know, mate, with your level of experience. Like I say, I know when we met, mate, you at the time, you was director of talent acquisition at Dragos, and there's been all sorts going on in the market. And I know you've gone through some tough times, come out the other side, and now you're cracking on again and moving forward. Have you got any stories about events as of late, and anything that could help the listeners, or anything that you've done to get yourself back in the right direction and get your career moving forward nicely again?
Yeah, you're right. It was definitely tough. I got laid off a year ago, and I spent about 8 months on the market. And being in a leadership role in recruitment was a double whammy, because recruitment as a whole took a hit. And when it started coming back, there's just less leadership roles. And because I was in a leadership role, the individual contributor opportunities would just bypass me because you're overexperienced, you're overqualified and such. That definitely presented a challenge on it. I think a couple things was definitely tenacity. I treated the search literally every day like it was a job. I would get up in the morning. I might not sit there 8 hours a day because it can be monotonous, but I would get up every day and I would dedicate probably 3 to 5 hours a day on a search. And I would rotate different job boards. Maybe today I'm going to spend the time on deep diving into LinkedIn, and then maybe Indeed or maybe some network stuff. But I would switch it up each day because you do tend to see some of the same stuff on that. Reach out, network as much as possible, utilizing third-party recruitment, utilizing agencies, because there's a lot of opportunities, and I don't think people quite are aware of, that don't make the market, right? You're never going to see a posting on it. For various reasons. It's just not going to. They could exclusively use third-party recruiters, so they don't have a board and stuff. So you're missing out a lot. So just casting a wide net, doing that, being tenacious. Interesting on, I think, one of the funny stories is I had an interview with this company I was really excited about. And when the recruiter reached out to me, she said, "We're late in the process here, but I still want to talk to you to see, and maybe the pipeline." I was like, okay, that's worth the conversation. Hit it off really well. Great conversation. In fact, she said, "Oh my God, you have to talk to our director on this." And I was like, okay, or the VP of HR. So the next day, get on with her. And that goes the same thing. It's a little late in the process, but we just hit it off really well. And she's, "I want to hurry up and get you into meet with the CFO." Now, double whammy on this one. It didn't go well, of course. So it was two things. Is one, they already had a couple candidates in process, which I found out, which I didn't know. So the CFO really had no desire to talk to anyone else. We have our final two. I don't want to kind of add another one, but I'll do it. And so I think he was hesitant on setting that up, which I didn't realize. And they set it up for a Friday afternoon, which is the definite kiss of death interview slot. I always tell people, do not take an interview past 1 o'clock on a Friday. I'm sorry. Don't do it. Make an excuse. Do it a different day. Because generally, Friday afternoon, people start checking out. They're tired. It's been a long week. And so it was like a 4 o'clock Friday afternoon interview with the CFO. And right away, as soon as I got on a video call, you could tell he was a little disheveled. The tie was loose and off. He hadn't shaved. He was just like sit back, like tired. And it was like the most awkward, engaging, awkward conversation. It was like pulling teeth. You couldn't get the connection because he went into that conversation already checked out. Already, I don't want to do this. I'm doing it as a favor. And in fact, I already have people in mind. So there's sometimes factors you as a candidate can't control because you don't know what's going on behind the scenes. And I figured it was a long shot, but I was like, yeah, I was really excited because I'm like, they fast tracked me and got me into the process. And I've done that a million times on the recruitment side where I'm like, late entry, but you got to talk to someone. Let's try to make sure we get them into the mix. But sometimes you just have senior leaders that are ultimately heavy influencers on it and they're going to reject it. And so that was one that was disappointing. But then turn around like 6 months later, the VP reached out to me and said, "I'm no longer there." Remember me, we had a really great conversation. It didn't finish well, but let's stay in contact because if it arises again with someone else, I'd love to chat with you again and maybe get the opportunity to explore working together.
Yeah, cool. Well, I think I said this on another show because someone else another guest had a similar experience. But it's nice to hear someone at your level listening to what you said: tenacity, 3 to 5 hours a day, going on different job boards, network, look at stuff that isn't on the market. Because there'll be people out there that are having a tough time and they'll be thinking it's because of them, but it's just not.
No.
It's what it's like. We've got this perfect storm: AI, automation, load of extra people on the market, loads of overhiring in 2022. So we've got this like really odd market, and it is tracking up again now, and we're noticing more stuff coming in, and it's definitely picking up. But it hasn't been normal. It has been tough. So it is nice, mate, to hear you say that that's just the way it is. And I think people will they'll feel better hearing you say that, mate. So I appreciate that, buddy.
Yeah, the market does. It ebbs and flows. And sometimes it's working with the company to understand that when it's an employer market, yes, you have more choices. You can slow it down. You have more options on it. But for so many years, that hasn't really been the case. It's been recently shifted, but I think that was a more in the grand scheme of things, a short reprieve from an employee market to employer market. But I
Mm.
think it's shifting back over just because the numbers, the opportunities that are out there. And I think companies really, and generational, you're dealing with different people, different needs and mentalities that I think they need to understand that you're trying to attract people and really come in and also set expectation to what's realistic. With the company I'm with now, it's unique that they have employees who've been there 30 and 40 years, lots of them, 40 plus years at one company.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, I've never made it 5 years at a company. I think it's a little nature of what we do.
Yeah,
Because I'm
yeah.
on the corporate side and companies aren't hiring, I get bounced a little bit quicker. They lay that off, but they have that. So when they try to hire people, he keeps wanting to emulate that. Only want to see people who have this long trajectory. And I've tried to educate him on there's good and there's bad with that, because
Mm.
when people have only been to one or two places, they lack the diversity of thought, right? Of different approaches to a problem. They know one single way. And there's a benefit oftentimes of, you might not want the person that jumps every year. There could be something with that, but maybe every 3 to 5 years, someone's making a move. To
Mm.
me, that's the best type of candidate for everyone all around, because it shows, especially if they're making a move and moving up, if there's some trajectory in that increasing, but they're bringing different perspectives to the table. And I think that's important for teams and companies to be open to, that you don't know all the answers. And there's not just one way to get your result. And you should continue to be open and bring in those folks who have different varied experiences. It doesn't always have to be my industry. And I've heard that so often. My industry, you don't get us. We're unique. We're special. They want to think that, but
Yeah,
every
no.
company I've ever worked for has said, we're unique, we're special, we're different, you don't get us. And you're a business.
Yeah.
As I mentioned before, you create a product or a service, you sell it out to the market and you deliver it.
Yeah, it's true, Bill. And also as well, it's in the tech market. I think if people have been like I've spoke to candidates before that have been at the same firm for a long time and they're dealing with the same set of customers and they're seeing the same environments and they're actually getting a little bit bored. But also from a career progression standpoint, if they haven't moved, obviously you don't want someone that's moving around all the time. But like you said, if they've been somewhere 4 or 5 years or whatever, then they're moving again, or 3, 4 years moving again, it probably is the optimal candidate because they're experiencing different sorts of customers, companies, environments, and they're getting that. If they've been somewhere for a long time, I think it can ultimately hold that person's career growth and progression back. So yeah, there's a balance to be had with it, mate, isn't there?
Yeah, even company, it's really interesting because when I first started recruiting back in the day, it was with Tech Worldwide Tech Aid, and they've been bought a few times. Interestingly enough, I've re-engaged with that company for some searches, right? And it's funny because this was 24 years ago. I started. The same people are literally there from 24 years ago. The same group, they've been there forever. Same people that I spent 5 years working with. So I know them well and kept in touch with many. But the pros and cons of working with them are, one is they know this industry as far as, because they've been working with those same clients over and over
Mm,
again
mm,
on it. But what I've noticed also now, 20 years later, they haven't grown from a consulting partnership standpoint. They're not bringing to the table what other agencies are as far as knowledge of the business, knowledge of what's going on and trends in that point. It's more of a, here's an order, I can fill it, right? And they're really good at filling it because
mm.
they have a huge database. They've placed these jobs over and over, but they haven't, but it's done the same thing over and over. They haven't elevated that part of the business yet.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, no, it's so much of it's about It's just interesting listening to you. So much of it's about relationships as well. Like you were there, say, 20 years ago. I bet that was nice in a way. They reach you back out like that. I bet it was pretty nice.
Oh yeah, it's great,
Yeah.
and to me, especially on this side, the relationships are important, and I've echoed that to our CEO on where I've put some new agency agreements in place with them and shifted some stuff up a little bit, and they're like, "Why this over that?" And I'm like, I know them, okay, and I trust them, and that
Yeah.
brings a lot of value because I
Mm.
know that I can pick up the phone and tell them exactly what I want, and they're going to listen. And even if they might have shifted companies, I might have worked with them 2 or 3 companies
Mm.
ago, I would rather go to that individual. And that happened recently. Someone I worked with at one company maybe 5 years ago now just popped up at another company. I put an agreement in place. I ended up moving from one agency to another for this lower level role to fill a contract role because better rates, but also it was like, I trust them, plain and simple.
Yeah.
I know they're going to listen and deliver, and and that's how I evaluate like the agencies I work with is what questions do they ask? What do they want to know? Are they simply saying, I have a perfect candidate for you? No, you don't. You never talk to me. You know nothing. 50%. You know the skill. You're missing 50%, the cultural fit, and you think you're going to be my partner. Next.
You've obviously, I mentioned before, you've recruited a lot. For people listening now that are on the market, if I was coming for an interview with you tomorrow, next week, you alluded to some stuff just then, but what are good things and bad things to do? What things you like to see on a resume or a profile? Like any tips, hints, or advice for people going into that first interview if they were interviewing with you or another experienced
Uh,
recruiter pretty soon?
I think a couple things. So, as I talked about before, with communicating the interview with problem, action, result, PAR, your resume should just be the AR, the action result. So many times, what people do is they'll take the job description and they'll copy and paste it into the resume. Job descriptions are awful for the most part. They're awful. It's a lot of HR speak that doesn't say much. So, I think from a resume standpoint, you should really focus and ask yourself the questions of what are the top 3 or 4 objectives that I accomplished here? What were the tasks that it took to get there? What am I most proud of? And what skills did it take to get there? So it's creating those bullet points, and definitely use bullet points because no one's going to read a paragraph blatantly. You have 8 seconds that we're going to skim it and try to pick out enough to say interested or not. You want to be action oriented with results driven. So I can see that performance. And then your descriptors are going to be the tools, the technologies, the skills that you have, because you want to make sure it's search engine optimized. So if you have the skill box, repeat those skills within the body of the resume of where you learned it so people aren't guessing. If the recruiter has to guess, they're probably not going to call you, right? It's an ad. Get me interested enough to pick up the phone and learn more. But if you don't give me enough to even make it worthwhile to pick up the phone or shoot an email, so you have to do that, and that'll help optimize your resume. The other thing is take 5 minutes before to prepare for the interview. Look at the website, right? Make sure you do your due diligence. It sounds basic, but I'll tell you, no matter what level job, I'll get on the phone with someone. I'm like, did you get a chance to look at the site? No, or they'll barely have an idea of what we do. But it also goes to the opposite extreme of being not prepared or trying to be over prepared. Of I know you, I know exactly what you do. I'm going to be the best one for it. You don't. You never been in the inside. So you got to go that middle ground of show that I understand from what I gathered and did. So I'm showing I did my research. From what I gathered, I understand this is the environment you're playing in, what you're doing, and then ask for validation. Do I have that correct? Because you want to be humble, as confident as you want to be, and make sure you're confident through also, you have to show some humility and some humbleness of, I'm not going to be arrogant and think I know everything. Here's what I know. Am I correct? Let me validate that. And I think just being prepared. So painting your picture of what you've accomplished, that's your profile, and then go in there and be prepared for that conversation. Try to understand maybe who's on the team, a little bit about their backgrounds, maybe where they came from, and, check out their LinkedIn profiles. I think any type of level of homework you do ahead of time is important. And also, and it's so funny, and sometimes you just have to make up stuff. So one of the questions I get all the time, what made you apply to this role? I'm applying to 30 and 40 jobs a day. It had the title. No offense, but I'm like rapid iron. There was no deep thought into it. However, when you go in the interview, make sure that you look at it and go, okay, can I answer that question? Is there something here enough that really interests me about the role? So when they ask, like, why did you apply? What attracted you? You can at least have some sort of answer, because in reality, the answer is I had the right job title and looked good. And this is a game of numbers game right now because of all those factors, how the market is and getting in on time. That it wasn't like I did a whole ton of research before I decided to hit the apply button. I threw it, and then what I may do then, if it's something of real interest, is go onto the board, try to find maybe the connections I have to it, maybe try to connect with someone on LinkedIn who's in the department. That works often. That one interview I was mentioning earlier that they got me in early, The reason is because I had applied, didn't get much of traction, but I was really interested. So I went out and tried to make connections to a couple of the recruiters and just sent them a quick message and was like, hey, I saw this looks really interesting what you guys are doing on it. I had a couple questions and I threw my resume in. I had a couple questions if you're open to a conversation. And I'm not being pushy, I'm asking, but just by sending that message to the recruiters, to two of them, one of them wasn't working on the job, ignoring me. The other one, it was their job they were trying to fill. So right away, what that got them to do, and it's a little hack, you send a message, chances are they're going to go, oh, really? Let me look into the database. I just passed. I just got my mission accomplished. I made them look at my resume. Because other than that, sometimes it's never looked at because of the volume that comes in. So many that it's, so you hit a certain point, you're like, I have 100 applicants, but in the first 50, I found 7 really good people I'm going to talk to. I don't have time to look at the other 50. It's a sad truth of what we do. But sometimes people are fantastic. They're just never looked at because of where you are in the process currently. So there's a lot of factors always at play. It's never clear cut. The one thing I would say you should never, ever do is send obnoxious notes because you've been rejected.
Yeah, that's probably not a good idea.
Yeah, no, I've had a couple of those lately. I had someone tell me I was a moron the other day.
Oh, you're joking.
Yeah, I rejected them, called me a moron. I was like, okay, great. We're going to document this. So if you ever apply again, we know what type of person you are. And then I had someone else threatening to sue me and sue the company because we didn't move forward with them. And I was like, because you're crazy.
Yeah. Bill, anyone calls you a moron again, you send them my way, mate. I'll deal with them. Don't worry.
That one off. I was like, this is a good one. I haven't been name called in a while, but I was called a moron because I didn't move forward with someone.
No. I think,
nowadays use good judgment.
Yeah, do you know what? But I've noticed it in this market. Like it was about 4 or 5 months ago. I noticed. I think there's some candidates out there that are they're just burnt out with it, aren't they? Like I really know, not so much now, but I did notice it a few months back. I think that's what it is. It's just
tough. I'll tell you, it is tough on the candidate side. I spent 8 months. I've never been out that long. It was frustrating.
Yeah.
It really was on there. It's just you got to stick with it. And even this opportunity that came along, it wasn't something that 6 months before I wouldn't have even considered. And unfortunately, I love it. I probably should have, but I wouldn't have because it was, no, I'm looking for this. I'm going to keep my focus here and look at that realm. But as time went on, it was like finally I was like, I'll take a contract role. I'll get a foot in the door. It's ideally, yes, I wanted the full time. I wanted this, but in retrospect, it was a great decision that I did take it. I think it gets me current, gets me back in a different industry, allows me to contribute in a little bit different ways than I've had to before. I've always been familiar with, and been part of, but I haven't had to own it. And here I've been able to come and own some of these functions completely and even get involved from a lead standpoint on other initiatives that I've been aware of or part of, but never really took the lead on.
Yeah, cool. But there's a few things that you mentioned in the last kind of 5 or 10 minutes that I want to cover. I think sending the connections to the recruiter, I think that's a massive one because I know so many people just won't do that. And I think if you do it and you do it in the right way, I think that's really powerful. You mentioned about companies not advertising. I know from being a recruiter and winning clients over the years, there is lots of companies out there that are hiring that don't advertise. For people out there that are prepared to play a little bit of a long-term game, if you can build relationships with employers, which is what I typically do before they hire, it is more long-term, but it's very effective if you're happy to play that long-term game. And then a final point, mate, that I really like what you said is about not just saying yes to everything straight away. Like you talked about people going, yes, I've got the perfect candidate for you. Yes, I can do this. Yes, I can do that. And it's so... You need to listen to that person first to find out because it's so disingenuous just to go, yes. So if someone reaches out to you, whether you're a recruiter or whether you're looking for a job, you're going to I'd need to find out a little bit more about you first to make sure we can definitely help because that's being real and being genuine. And also, I think in the modern world, if you like, it goes down pretty well because people are like, oh, I expected you to just go, yes, everyone else does. So I think that taking a step back and going, look, to be honest with you, but I don't know if I can help you yet. Once we've had a chat, I'll let you know if I can find out a bit more about. I think having that approach just makes you stand out from the noise, and also it's more honest and real as well, mate, isn't it?
Yeah, that actually 100% happened in this role because when I went through an agency, they submitted my profile over. An hour later, I get a phone call. I didn't even have a heads up. So I was thinking, like, I got your resume. So I thought it was like the account manager sent it to the recruiter. So I get on the phone. I'm in my car. My husband's actually in the car with me. Have it on speakerphone. And he's like, do you have a minute to talk? I'm like, yo, I'm driving, but hey, yeah, I got a couple minutes. And I was thinking it was just a recruiter. And 5 minutes in the conversation, I realized I'm talking to the owner of the company.
Oh,
And it took
wow.
me a moment to realize it. Oh, okay. And it was interesting because my resume doesn't say a whole lot about like my hardware and engineering background because it was dated. But as we talked, and we were talking maybe 10 minutes tops, but as he described it, I'm like, oh, wow, this is exactly what I did here. And I did this a long time ago. And within that short period of time, he just said, he goes, you're the first person I talked to that knows the full gambit from operations, IT, engineering, can hit it all. He goes, yeah, I think you're the right one. I'd love to have you come and start with us. And he really tried to hire me over the phone call.
Oh, wow.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it. I presented. However, I had to push back on that. And I said, I appreciate this. This was a Friday. I said, I think we should meet first. So I think it's really important to meet just to make sure that there's a good alignment on here to success. I said, plus, I have 2 interviews on Monday. And I want to do those. And then, but why don't we come in and meet on Tuesday? And he said, I want you to commit. I said, I'll absolutely commit if it's the right fit. However, I said, I'm not going to bypass these 2 opportunities for without us even talking a little bit further. I think that's a little short-sighted because if we don't connect, then I've lost out on something. So I pushed back and we went in on Tuesday and we decided, we agreed to, I'd come in from 9 to 11 for a 2-hour interview with the expectation, as long as we matched up, I would just stay for the rest of the day. They'd give me a lot. And that's when I went into that meeting with the CEO and the chairman. And about an hour into that conversation, the dad left the room, came back in and said, I haven't discussed this with you or my son yet, and that's when he threw out, I think you know a little bit more about HR in the background than I thought. Would you mind jumping in and taking on more responsibilities in the short term? I was like, I'm a consultant. That's what I'm here to do. And I'm glad we met face to face because that was so important in making the decision. Because I could have jumped on and said, yeah, I'll accept it. I'll commit. I need a job. I've been out of work 8 months. Yes, I'm in a position I need to get something. But it was really important to still be true to myself and show value to them to say, don't jump the gun so quick. Let's sit down. I don't care if it's just an hour, but let's sit down. Let's talk and make sure that it's a good alignment. And it's been fantastic.
Yeah, no, I really like that. But again, it just shows, due diligence, it shows honesty, it shows not just wanting to ditch those other appointments, shows a certain level of character as well. And it's better for you, it's better for the employer, it's better for everyone. And and it's a differentiator as well because so many people will just go, yes. And there's a guy I've mentioned him before. It's called Dragon's Den in the UK. It's called Shark Tank in the US, but there's a recruitment guy who's on that show, and he always says, observe the masses and do the opposite. And that's what you're doing there. And it's good, mate. But yeah, the contracting thing as well. I think that's a really good. You use the word foot in the door. That I think that is a really good thing. I know contract staffing is up as an industry, like even in a downturn, a lot of people are leaning towards it. You found that quite positive so far. Do you think that's a good way for listeners to go?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the one thing I don't think people understand is the contract game is a leading indicator of the market. Okay. I spent half my career on the contract side and the other half on the corporate side. And what I can say is follow the contract companies and you really have a good indication. When things are on an uptick, right, but companies are still hesitant to really jump forward, they'll bring people on contract, right? They still need the work done. They'll invest more in contractors and then they'll have the confidence and then they'll start doing more direct hires. And so it's a great leading indicator. And the truth, it's true on the reverse. Oftentimes, on the agency side, people start cutting contractors, starting doing that. And again, usually about 6 to 9 months before the downturn in the economy, you'll feel a cut in those contract opportunities, a cut in that. So I think the contracting game is a great foot in the door, but it's really a good indicator of the market as a whole on the ups and downs because you feel it first on the agency side before the rest of the market does.
Yeah, it's all heavily a peg to the economy bill, and I think for people to remember as well is it is just so cyclical. I did a post about it and just said, look, when we're in a boom, we're on the way to a bust, and when we're in a bust, we're on the way to the boom. And
Yes,
that is by nature how every economy globally works and
yeah,
functions, and this, that, and the other. And the news always talk about this, that, and the other, but it'll always be really negative. But it's cyclical. It always comes back round. It pays to be nice because one minute is client led, next minute is candidate led. It's just,
absolutely.
and it's nice, and it's nice to be nice.
Yeah, it is absolutely around. You got to. I can solve the company. Keep your reputation. Make sure you treat people. That makes all the difference in the world on it
Yeah.
from the company standpoint. Because then, if you treat someone well, I could disqualify them, but I can then pick up the phone 3 6 months later and be like, "Hey, didn't work out, but I have something now." In fact, I have a call tonight with someone I rejected 2 or 3 months ago, and we made some internal shifts. And I reached back out, and he's, "Wow, I'm surprised to hear from you. I thought you guys weren't interested because," but I was honest with him. And I said, "We've changed some things. I would agree to a follow up conversation." So I'm going to talk to him this evening, and maybe it'll go somewhere. I don't know, but it's always worth the
Mm.
call. But if I didn't treat that person well, they wouldn't have responded to me. They wouldn't have even engaged on the follow up conversation.
Yeah, definitely. I think as well the way the world's going, like if you're in a particular niche or sector, it especially all comes back around just with the age of the internet. Like everything's just becoming so much more transparent these days.
Yeah,
It really, and I found it as well. But it's like everything loops back round, and you bump back into people. And if you take the attitude of doing it when you're in something for a long time, I'm sure you found it as well, things just get easier because when you know people and you can do this and do that, like I say, if the market dips and you've got some good relationships, it's difficult. It's not a
right.
nightmare. Whereas the relationships make a big difference. But Bill, on in terms of any kind of I normally ask about a podcast or a book that you found helpful for your career. So I'll ask about that, and also any mindset tips for when you were on the market and you landed your role. Any tips for keeping your mindset strong as well for the listeners?
Yeah, one of the best books, I think, and this is an older book on here, but I've adopted a lot of my recruitment philosophy, is Lou Adler. I think he's written a series of books. One of the first ones I read was probably close to 20 years ago, called Power Hiring, but it just really stuck with me. And the whole thing about describing behavior based interview methodology, which is what people still use today. Right. And it's a whole concept of past performance predicts future success. So, really focusing on that. So, a lot of what I've built my recruitment strategies on and how I've attacked the market, both from a candidate and from a consulting or from a company standpoint, has really adopted a lot about that, about Lou Adler, because he's got a bunch of interesting books, but it's really about focusing on the accomplishments and peeling back from trying to match, requirements with experiences verbatim. It's about hiring the right team member for that who can accomplish similarly what you want to get done. So definitely from a recruitment standpoint, I think that's a great foundational book and stuff. And as far as I think staying positive on the market, it's tough to do, but you have to. I think you just really have to do it and realize that each of the opportunities you have, even if this would be in a contract opportunity, I look at where can it add value to my experiences and how does it continue to add value. I would love this to turn into something long term or direct because they're fantastic people. I know in reality it won't. So my goal is to really focus on accomplishing to the best of my ability what I'm doing there. And then I have strong advocates when I go back out to the market. I have really strong references for that and some new experiences to really expand my resume to move on to the next place.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. References and storytelling is really powerful as well, mate. Into like, I just think that really makes a difference. I'm relating to it on the client side with what we do. When people can see real life stories of us delivering, yeah, it speaks volumes. And I see you mentioned references there, so I think that's a good thing for the listeners to pick up on. But
Funny
yeah.
thing about references, and I know we have to wrap up in a moment, is so interesting. We just hired a candidate, right, and an accountant. And as we evaluated, both the director and our HR director and myself, the three of us interviewed this candidate, loved everything about them. However, we found one area we were very universal on, saying that we don't think this person is going to be as proactive as we would like, which is okay. They're going to do everything within structure, great knowledge. Are they going to be the one to jump ahead and really drive stuff? Interestingly enough, when I did the references and I talked to four different managers, the first thing that they said to everyone was, "Oh my God, Absolutely incredible, proactive, to jumped in. And so the one area we perceived as a weakness in the interview process was the one item that each reference is, and this is where they're absolutely the strongest in. So it was really interesting to bring that back to the team and share, because I was like, hey guys, we thought this. The references aren't vetting that. We actually hopefully made a better decision than we thought.
Yeah, cool. There you go. But yeah, they're good, Bill. But mate, it's been nice chatting, my friend. And yeah, mate, an hour soon goes, doesn't it?
It does. You and I can always talk.
Yeah, we can, my friend. We can. But Bill, really nice to talk to you, as always, my friend. And yeah, it's nice to see you. And I'm sure we'll catch up again.
Thank you again.